Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your life.
What is going on, beautiful people? Welcome back to the 817 Podcast, where we talk about the lovely city of Fort Worth, Texas. We get into politics, business, culture, news. If it impacts you as a Fort Worthian, we discuss it. We give you 3 short stories, 1 big story, wins and losses every week. I'm with my co-hosts, Ann Zeta. We both arrived back from California in one piece. How goes it? How was your trip?
My trip was fantastic. I spent Thursday through Sunday in a very mixed-use, walkable downtown environment in Sacramento, California. I got to see my kids. We successfully completed an escape room in the time. Like, I feel smart. I partially it's because my child is very, very smart and
my little brother's
led
good
the
at this.
effort, but I feel like I might want to try that again sometime.
Yeah, it's cool. I actually enjoyed. I think I've done it twice. Once with like work people, and then once with family. And
there were 6 of us in there. My youngest wasn't able to go because it conflicted with their schedule. But my oldest and his girlfriend and another couple that are friends of theirs, and my husband and myself, and we all pitched in. I think we all felt like we, lended a helping hand to get it all done.
Well, that sounds like a good transition of all of us pitching in to leave this escape room called the Red Wave in Tarrant County. We all need to vote, and our last chance to register to vote is today, Monday. Obviously, we're recording this early, but we wanted you to be aware that today is the last day to register to vote. So if you got a young child who's 18 or over, or a family member or a neighborhood friend you talk to often, this is the time to get them in the car and go register to vote. And make this happen, as we have an important...
Hopefully people did not wait until the last minute to do that, but they have the rest of the day today to get that done if they did.
And there's several things that you will be able to vote on, some U.S. Senator, U.S. Representative, Railroad Commissioner, Texas Supreme Court Justices, Court of Criminal Appeal Judges, State Board of Education members, State Representative, Second Court of Appeals Justice, District Judges, the Sheriff, Tax Assessor Collector, Tarrant County Commissioner. So a lot of different things you might be able to.
President of the United States.
President of the United States, making history.
That's why it's so important to go all the way down the ballot. I mean, I personally don't understand anybody who doesn't complete a whole ballot. I've skipped over certain races before when I just absolutely had no knowledge whatsoever, and I didn't want to vote for a moron. So I can't say that I've never left a race unanswered on a ballot, but I've always gone through the entire ballot.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do it because they don't know anything besides the president.
But even though the deadline to get registered, if you are already registered, you have until November 5th, Election Day, to learn about all these races and educate yourself. And hopefully we'll be talking about some more of this as time goes on so that people are prepared. I had a meeting today with some advocates for transit and transportation who are looking to do some education and make sure questions are asked about transportation of an upcoming election that we have in May. So May of next year, you'll get to vote again because there's local elections in May of next year.
And those are the ones that really bites us in the you-know-what, because we don't show up for those.
And they definitely have an impact on our daily lives.
I mean, clearly with, everything going on at the county. So our first story is a story. We decided to kind of bring in some other news topics. I know we've been very political heavy, interview heavy. So we want to bring on some economics. I missed a classic business development, economic development story. So this one's about AI cloud computing is growing in Dallas-Fort Worth. Data centers need to be located close to where people live. An exploding population is driving exponential numbers of physical facilities that house the servers, switches, routers, firewalls, software, and applications to require for an increasingly data-driven world. Demand is everywhere for data centers, and currently Dallas-Fort Worth is second in line as the place with the most opportunity for data centers. The report says under construction actively totaled 472.1 megawatts in Dallas-Fort Worth area, nearly 73% increase year over year. Of the space under construction, a record 94.5% has been released, giving the market little flexibility as overall vacancy shrunk to 4.4%. city council approved the zoning changes of data centers. And this, the one, if we remember, this one is in Jared Williams' space or district, and it was the neighbors did not necessarily want it with concerns of I guess noise pollution.
I actually watched the zoning case, and there was a split. There were neighbors that supported it and neighbors that were opposed to it.
And what ended up happening?
They passed it.
And it seems the reason would be because of the tax value. Basically, Jared Williams said that the project is tax value would be $750 million. That would make it one of the top 5 taxable projects in the city, possibly. Now, the issue with data centers, they don't bring a lot of employment, but in order to keep them up, it takes a lot of expenses and equipment, which allows us to be able to get tax on that. An average data center can cost up to $200 million to construct. I find it like what's sad about the story, and maybe it's just not in this story, is, a lot of cities have taken advantage of the CHIPS Act, if it's Samsung in Austin or Taiwan Semiconductor in Phoenix. I mean, a lot of these CHIPS Acts have allowed for anything built by the CHIPS Act be able to pass a lot of these like classic procedures that you need to pass in order to get something done, because they're just talking about efficiency with federal dollars. And it even just seems like the Taiwan Semiconductor has all new factory in Phoenix is ahead of schedule and already shipping chips and things to Apple. So it's also a win that we're seeing outside of Texas. And I'm surprised that with Texas getting so much federal funds, that none of this stuff is funded by the CHIPS Act, or we at least don't hear anything about these data centers being funded by the Inflation Reduction Act or the CHIPS Act.
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with that side of things. Like I said, I watched this zoning case in front of the council at their meeting, and I saw the concerns that were raised by residents. This was an existing planned development that had already been zoned for kind of a mix of uses, commercial and I think industrial, and there's some residential nearby. And so the residential folks were concerned about it not being a mixed-use retail center, because that would bring them more of the things closer to them that would make it so that they don't have to go as far to get to those things, because they live in single-family neighborhoods that don't have a lot of those services nearby. So I can see the concern there. I don't think that the change in the PD was incredibly dramatic. Their concerns about traffic and those sorts of things, I think, were probably unfounded, because there's not a whole lot of traffic going to these data centers. Their concerns about energy consumption and water use and noise are something that I think definitely needs to be looked into, but I think there's quite a significant distance between the single-family residential and the data center. And in that case, they actually talked about visiting an existing data center in far north Fort Worth, and basically some folks were saying they could hear it, some folks were saying that it was negligible and not negatively impactful.
Yeah, I know a lot of the other concerns is how much energy it takes to keep data centers going, because these have to run 24/7. There's no lag. But you're also seeing that Texas is leading in renewable energy, battery storage. And so it just seems like we're a great place to house data centers as well, because of the investments we're making. You even saw Amazon acquired a data center campus powered by nuclear energy in Pennsylvania, which is allowing Amazon to purchase carbon-free energy directly from the nuclear operator. And so obviously affordable, infinite electricity is going to be in our future in some capacity. And it seems like Texas, even though we love our oil, we love money. And it seems like now we're at a point where a lot of these other options are becoming more affordable than the traditional fossil fuel model, now that battery storage is also becoming more scalable and affordable as well. So,
well, they did also say that data centers can fairly easily be switched to other remote data centers if data centers in the area is straining resources of one area. So
yeah,
they have a way of those being connected and switching one to the other. Although, like when we were talking about the Bitcoin stuff, they were saying that they would have to the state would pay them to not use the energy. Mm-hmm. And I hope that's not what we're doing here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm just glad that the Metroplex is in some kind of conversation around AI. I mean, I don't know. It's a whole fascinating space and time, and wrapping my head around the possibilities. I'm reading this book the fourth book by Yuval Noah Harari called Nexus, and I'm a big fan. He's one of my favorite authors, and I read his other 3 books. But it's really just talking about how much AI really controls and already controls in the sense of our financial markets, whether we get a loan or not, and it's just really fascinating about how AI has the ability to understand a lot of information that we may be unable to process, and how much do we rely on these things to really navigate our work decisions, our life decisions. And now they're not only going to be, technically data centers that we live by, they're truly going to be changing how we live on a regular basis as well. So,
well, you know how into
stuff.
AI Jim is. He's constantly reading up on it and doing presentations about it. He just went out to a local nearby city where they had him present to their one whole department, and then the city manager had him come back to present to the entire city. And this guy is really bullish on using AI, and so he's wanting his employees to use it but document how they use it, and so that they can see like how it is beneficial or not, and document all of that so that they can figure out how to use it as a tool, basically.
Definitely a ton of opportunity. I mean, every day I'm at the point of saying, how can I do what I'm doing right now with AI, and figuring out how can I make a decision better. If it was in San Francisco last weekend, deciding on plans, if it was deciding on getting a reservation, it was all the different ways because, the ocean is deep, and it's fascinating what, AI is really the first thing that allows, when you look at like media and success of media. They even had something crazy. I saw this the other day. They had AI create a podcast show based off of articles written by a blogger, and then they just had fake co-hosts talking about stories based off of the personalities of the blogger. And it had voices.
Obsolete.
Exactly. We could just, take all the 817 podcast episodes you've heard of Ann and EJ, and then just run a weekly show updating everyone about Fort Worth, and it could just be AI doing it rather than you and I. But there's still a lot of, I think, nuances.
I think people would miss us, though.
Yeah. Would they even know?
Oh, I hope people would be able to see the quirkiness of us through robotics.
Yeah, no, I think that's going to be the interesting piece with it is how much can humans really separate human interaction and still know this is a human compared to AI? Or is it going to get too good where we just simply wouldn't know? And then that would be hard to, stick with human-led things if you can't even tell. But I think you'll be able to tell for a while.
So
Fingers crossed. But this is the first time, though, what I was saying is that AI tools can recreate their own ideas and thoughts and talk to each other rather than needing human intervention to create it, right? Like a newspaper needed someone to write the story, mass media on TV needed someone to host and read the teleprompter and write the teleprompter. Now, eventually, these things are going to be able to connect to each other and build content without us needing to get involved. And so what does data look like? So,
so far, I've only used it when I've controlled the inputs. So not just opening it up to pulling in stuff from the internet, because I don't know what's true and what's not in that. And so it could put something that's false. And so what I've used it for is just creating something using other documents that already exist and are in my control.
Yeah.
And giving it directives of what to do, or having Jim help me with that. Actually, I have to be honest. He's my AI expert.
Cool. Well, we're going to move into short story number 2. Short story number 2 is our favorite topic, not our favorite topic, but a topic we feel like we constantly are discussing. And that's mercy culture. Mercy Culture accuses Fort Worth of discrimination over plans for human trafficking shelter. This is a report by Harrison Mantis, a friend of the pod. Mercy Culture church leaders are accusing the city of Fort Worth of discrimination. The church applied for a commercial building permit on July 10th, but a city review of the application determined that the proposed 100-bed shelter didn't comply with the Fort Worth land use rules. The city is requiring Mercy Culture to rezone its property before building the shelter. This would require public hearing before the zoning commission and approval by the city council. Those rules infringe on the church's freedom of religion, lead pastor Heather Schott told her congregation Sunday. She noticed that the church's current zoning established in 2004 allows for church-related activities. The city, quote, the city of Fort Worth and the zoning committee, let me make this clear, does not determine what those activities are. The Bible does, end quote. The proposed shelter is part of the church's justice reform ministry, which seeks to rehabilitate victims of human trafficking.
So we've talked about this before because this proposal was brought forward a couple of years ago and declined to move forward because of what they were proposing to do here. It was beyond what I think falls into the category of church-related activities. To have a 100-bed shelter is quite a substantial land use, different than one would normally associate with the church. And they came back with a second shot at this, calling it something a little bit differently. And it was an article we touched on where they said it was
a discipleship center.
Yes, a discipleship center, which sounded like a place where people who might want to go into the ministry would go for training and classes of some sort for maybe short periods of time. But now in this article, it is pretty clear, because I even questioned then whether they were just trying to call it that, but still move forward with what they were originally proposing, and that was the 100-bed shelter for folks experiencing human trafficking. And so back when that was proposed, and now they're back to basically proposing that same thing again, but claiming that this is a church activity that should not be regulated by zoning. And churches are allowed in all zoning categories. And so I just guess it depends on how far you go with the definition of church-related activities.
I feel like when it comes to people who are dealing with human trafficking incidents, you would need health professionals and people who are qualified to deal with traumatic issues and helping people with their physical, mental, and economic state. And
safety and protection.
Yep, safety and protection.
Been trafficked. You don't want them to be trafficked again. So you would like to make sure that they can remain safe. And having a center that basically is out there saying this is a shelter full of human trafficked victims, if people are looking for those victims, typically when you're running from that, either human trafficking or domestic abuse of some sort, you keep these locations secret so that the folks that have victimized them in the past aren't able to do so again.
And like you said, they've been trying to do this since December 2021, but ran even opposition with residents in the nearby neighborhood, Oakhurst, which is another red flag. Like if your neighborhood is not allowing you to do this, maybe they also don't believe you're qualified to be hosting this. And here's my big red flag. Landon Schott, who called those who opposed the project insane demonic resistance in his May 2023 sermon. People who talk like this, and if you go to anything they talk, these are the same people who said if you vote Democrat, you're going to hell. I mean, these are the same people who think LGBTQ people are going to hell. How would you allow, what qualification do you have to objectively be supporting anyone who is vulnerable, who is in need, who is probably in a reactionary state? How are you qualified to have any right to step into these people's lives, regardless if you believe in God or not? Like these behaviors are exploitative and bully-esque, and now you're trying to do that to the city. And again, just another example of how these white nationalist kind of hyper Christian conservatives keep making, I don't know how corporate conservatives stay conservative. Like, eventually you're going to have to come walk on the other side and create some bipartisan movement to get rid of these kind of cats who keep,
I mean, I think if your issue is human trafficking and you want to try to reduce human trafficking, I think that lots of organizations support those types of efforts and support individuals who are qualified and trained to rescue people from those situations. And that's fine. But I think that doing it yourself, when you might have ulterior motives of trying to kind of bring people into your religious beliefs, can be problematic.
100%. So we're going to go ahead and move into short story number 3.
So this is kind of sad. I saw this article and I sent it to you kind of out of, jokingly. I'm not sure. I thought we would talk about it, but it says you likely won't find love in Fort Worth. A new study on dating explains why. Now, EJ and I don't have to worry about this because we're not dating. We both are happily married. But according to this survey, a recent study found that Fort Worth is one of the worst cities for dating in the United States. According to Time Out researchers, they looked at 20 major U.S. American cities to find the best and worst ones for finding a companion by evaluating data from the U.S. Census Bureau. Some of those factors included the number of residents in each city, the likelihood of marriage and divorce rates, the number of persons actively seeking relationships, and the study also considered factors like cost of living and quality of life. Where did Fort Worth rank in this dating study? Dallas was ranked third best city for dating, which I hear from my single friends that going to Dallas is, a more active place to find other single folks. But that's due to high numbers of people actively searching for dates and its cost of living, while Fort Worth ranked sixth worst on the list. And residents apparently were not surprised by this. It's time to move. Somebody said, I knew it was not for me at this time. My therapist must be drinking again, one person wrote in response to the studies posted on Facebook.
Yeah, and honestly, we were just talking about this article because we wanted to give some love advice and talk about love in Fort Worth. I mean, I have a lot of, I guess, single friends in Fort Worth, and predominantly I always see this challenge is that the most of the single people I know are my successful female friends. I mean, my wife is a medical professional. A lot of her medical professional friends are single, with the difficulty of finding someone who's comfortable with their, I guess, career success, or probably earning more income than they are, or have the ability to have the empathy or intelligence. I actually believe that, I can see how Fort Worth would be very hard if you were single, one, because there's not a lot of density. I imagine density would be a big part. It wasn't a big part of this survey because, I mean, New York was like the worst place, and that was density central. But I imagine the density would be a big issue for us. But then also, I mean, the politics of men and women are also showing that, women are more likely to be progressive, more likely to be college graduates, and men are more likely to, especially if you aren't a graduate, you are likely to be Republican. They're showing data that if trends hold on college enrollment, for every one man who graduates, 2 women will be graduating college. So if one degreed woman is marrying the other male degreed man, that leaves one degreed woman having to decide or find someone who maybe not meet the same type of income. And I don't think those are problems. I just think those are things I think we have an outdated mindset of what it means to be a man in today's society. And you have a lot of these church people like Mercy culture still talking about women needed to submit to their men, and
Traditional
yeah,
roles.
and the traditional stuff. I think men, we are in the positions we're in for a lot of our inability to change our minds, or to not be okay with being superior, or acting as if we have everything together. Because I think you're living out of state. If you're under 30 and you're in a cis relationship or looking for one, you're going to find somebody who's a female who most likely will make more money than you, who will most likely be more educated than you, and doesn't need your physical presence to protect them anymore. So if you were going to if you were going to matter because of your physical dominance, your intelligence, or your money, those are no longer things you're actually given to a female. So that would mean you have to have some intuitiveness, some intelligence, some empathy, some ability to find your own unique voice. And I think, men are really, you look at most likely all the rages that happen in with gun violence in our country, it's often men. When you look at people who fall into QAnon, who follow all that stuff, it's likely men. And you're looking at, today, percentage of people aged 25 to 34 living at home with their parents, 1 of every 5 male does, compared to 12% of women. So, 1 of 8. And if you look at average time spent alone, men spend more time alone. So we are going through like this massive male crisis. And my number one kind of advice I can give to a guy looking for to do this whole community is like, I know there's this big obsession with like running clubs now, but you got to also see like things have to be about being entrepreneurial, right? If people tell you where to go, it's probably already too late. And I think going back to our first story with AI, so much of life is going to be based off the people who can see between the numbers and have the confidence to move before everyone else does on an intuitive foresight. And I believe what men should do is not join running clubs. You should actually get civically engaged. If you look at any Beto volunteer group, if you look at any Tarrant for Change event, if you look at any United Fort Worth event, if you look at anything that has to do with politics and civic engagement and community, it's often ran and the ratio between men and female is high because women are more actively engaged and men are not. So I think that's actually way better than running clubs. So that's my 817 advice. If you're trying to find love, is get civically involved.
Yeah, I don't know if I have advice for people who are trying to find significant others because I haven't done it in such a very, very long time. I'm perfectly happy with the one I found.
That makes sense to me, Fort Worth being a hard place for love. I haven't seen it be easy, and I hear these dating apps in Fort Worth are also a struggle. That would also be a different challenge. Like, I'm so thankful I did not grow up with.
Exactly.
And
I never had to do any of that.
Yeah, that would also be rough. But yeah, maybe there's someone out there who would go on a full head main topic about this on the 817 pod about how hard it is to date in Fort Worth. Because I feel like
I hear people complain about it. My friends that are single, both straight and LGBTQ folks, I've heard that this is a struggle.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people should be civically engaged. I think people should go be active in areas that are interesting to them.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't necessarily want somebody to join any kind of club that they weren't just interested in just for the sole sake of finding other people. Because if you join a club that you're not really that interested in, you're going to find other people that are interested in things you're not interested in.
Yeah. But then that's how that's how they turn into running. None of these cats really like to run.
Yeah,
and then they become runners and then become fitter. And now they got a six pack. They lose some inches on their pant size. If we can get them to come to some of these events, then they're, conservative behinds might start realizing how the world works,
I'm all for people being more civically engaged. That's absolutely the truth. I don't know if I ever thought I'd be sitting here telling people they should do that for dating purposes, but I'm very happy to encourage folks to be civically engaged.
I tell all my, that's a line I tell all my men friends. Quit going to running clubs and start getting civically engaged, Yeah. Anyhow, let's get ready to roll. We're going to move into the big story. The big story is something that came out right after we kind of did our last episode, and that was around JPS. We've talked about JPS and the health network having to deal with potentially losing millions of dollars in tax revenue for 2025, and it's due to the possible of the hospital's tax rate being lowered. And it looks like that decision is being met on September 26th. The hospital district board voted 5-4, reaffirming that the hospital district original fiscal year 2025 budget will now result into a $14 million loss in tax revenue. The decision comes over a week after Tarrant County Commissioner approved a lower tax rate than previously proposed.
So yeah, we touched on this in a previous article because there was an article regarding the county commissioner's court discussing whether or not the tax rate that they were considering was okay with JPS. And several of the commissioners mentioned that they'd had, one-on-one conversations and, oh yeah, they're all good with this. But clearly there was some miscommunication. And my comment to you was, when there's two taxing entities or there's two organizations that are dealing with the same taxing entity that need to make decisions that impact each other, that there are professional staff at the ready to answer questions and give a breakdown of what these decisions, the outcomes that these decisions will make. So I think that the commissioner's court could very easily have had the staff show them, here's what the result of this is going to be. And then they could have had a conversation with the people running JPS about their budget before just cutting this tax rate. And I think that this is, we talked about the city of Fort Worth and how they've cut the tax rate over the years over and over and over in an attempt to always be elected officials who are cutting the tax rate because people's biggest complaint is taxes. And our whole last pod was talking about how are we going to continue to provide these services with less money. And so here we find ourselves again with the hospital district preparing to lose tax revenue in 2025 because of a rate reduction that they didn't make, but that was made for them by the commissioner's court and the county judge. And so they're going to have to figure out where to cut things. And I think we've already heard multiple times about things that they're getting ready to do to try to improve, like their mental health services, and all of the various healthcare needs that residents have throughout the community that are going to be negatively impacted by this lowering of the rate.
And we also have to understand, like, a lot of what the county hospitals do is support the uninsured. And Texas is the highest state with uninsured residents. And so when you look at that, we have to figure out how do we meet the needs of that community, especially when it seems like that community is also increasing. And so this just is another shows the power of who gets elected into office. You know, what happens when, I mean, Tim O'Hare is maniacally focused on lowering the amount of power governments have, the lower taxes to lower services. And we may never really understand the full consequences of this. I mean, we talked about in our one conversation with Anthony Johnson's sisters and how they were just looking to take advantage of services offered to their brother, to then having this situation ended up with him in jail and him losing his life. And so if our services are already at a space where even when you look to use them, couldn't deal with the death, now it seems like the hope of ever having actual services in place could come in a lot of different ways. And and for me, you know, there's a lot of different discussions within JPS around departments being cut and things that might be available to these people. And so if the first step is to get Medicaid or Medicare, yet our state's one of the most difficult to do that, then we're leaving a lot of people not having the baseline kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs supported so that they can go out and do things to build their economic viability. Heck, we just talked about dating and, taking risks to go meet other people. But, those engagements also takes, some type of support and services if it's from, interactions with different beings. So there's a lot of different parts here that hospitals provide, especially, I know a lot of health professionals, and they do a lot of great work to service people in our community who don't have access.
So they're saying also that this could not only lead to a reduction of the services, but, they're about to implement some construction plans. And so there's a second article from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. Will the tax cut affect JPS's construction plans? Leaders at odds over the county's surprise move. So again, it was a surprise to some people. And the fact that this was a surprise, I think, shows a lack of consideration of the impact that these decisions are having on the entities that have to carry out the work that the county is tasked with carrying out. So the hospital system usually gets about a third of its operating money from property taxes, and the tax rate is determined by the county commissioners, as we pointed out. Lowering the rate leaves them with about $14.2 million in property tax revenue, lower than what they were expecting. And they're about to embark upon, or they have been gearing up for, this bond $2.1 billion construction program, and a massive overhaul, which will include a new hospital, new psychiatric emergency center, all being paid for by $800 million in bonds. And the rest of the money comes from hospital cash and will require the hospital to save $83.3 million each year for the next 5 years.
According to the U.S. Census Bureau, about 1 in every 5 Tarrant County adult under the age of 65 does not have health insurance. JPS also operates one of 2 emergency rooms in the county that are capable of handling the most serious trauma cases. So they also are pivotal in some of the most critical work. And so this kind of also reminds me of our last episode where we talked about Land of the Free-for-All. And you know what? We're now living at a place where we don't believe in providing basic hospital needs to all residents of our county. And now we're putting that in the hands of churches like Mercy Culture to believe that they can provide services their way. And that if churches start being the answer to our caregiving process, that's what this kind of feels like. It's that churches now feel empowered to solve these voids. I bet Mercy Culture, somehow thinks they can do other things now as well if you give them the opportunity to do human trafficking. What is to say that other things that fall off of JPS list because they can't fund now go to another hospital saying, oh, we see a need, and now we're going to use this as a place to bring in more people into our congregation?
I mean, there are churches now that are doing this type of
Yeah.
work. I know that Travis Avenue Baptist Church has Mercy Clinic, which is not the same as Mercy Culture. And they've had that for years. And they've been focused on a population that is underserved with medical services because of lack of insurance. And they've expanded the zip codes which they serve because this need is growing. So for the county to not see that the need is growing and to be so solely focused on reducing taxes, and because one of the commissioners basically said, not one of the commissioners, but one of the board members said that their goal is to reduce the tax to zero.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that just is what we touched on last time, and that is a desire to have less government.
Yep.
And I don't think that you're going to have just and equitable services if everybody has to rely upon a religious institution or a nonprofit to provide these services. And especially if there's strings attached that require you to believe a certain thing or sit through a religious service or some such thing in order to get those services or to be proselytized to as you get your teeth taken care of.
Yep. The powers of institutions, right? It's like you have the capitalist class, which Texas says, hey, businesses come on in. As long as you create economic viability, we pretty much let you do anything. Hey, churches, come on in because we also believe in Christianity only. And hey, Christians, let's create the community safety nets for our society. There's just something sticky when you rely on capitalism and Christianity to lead your society. And that's why having a government and free of religion and free of an agenda to be able to support all people. A lot of these people are refuge. A lot of these people also don't speak English. Yeah. And the whole thing that you said about not paying property taxes thing is like, I sent you an article about how more Americans are more reliant than ever on the government. And when you look at Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, retirement from the military, when you look at all these things, we are more reliant on government. To give you an example, by the 2000s, roughly 1 in every 10 county drew a significant share of their income from federal and state safety net and social programs. And that is, they're identifying 25% or more of their income from federal or state safety net programs, a county. Now, in 2022, 53%, more than half of all U.S. counties drew at least a quarter of their income from government aid. So when you talk about underfunding public schools, that is tons of people who work for public education. When you talk about underfunding JPS Hospital, you're talking about tons of people who live and work there. When you talk about not fixing roads or not expanding transportation, these are jobs. And when we act like all these things are just expenses and waste, no, our government actually funds our existence in a lot of ways. And as much as we want to act like we're this independent capitalistic society, a lot of our money flows through the government, giving us the ability to do the things that we do. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. Let's be clear. I'm just saying statistically, we're already in a way a social capitalistic establishment that relies on our government to fund our economic drivers.
And I think the main takeaway from this to me is just these kind of unintended consequences when elected officials make decisions without either, I mean, if they had full information and they decided to do this, then they should respond to the request from the Star Telegram to explain themselves, because that's another thing that I'm finding quite often is we reached out and didn't hear back from none of the commissioners who voted for this responded to the request of the Star Telegram in calls and emails. And I think that I would want to, the surprise nature of all of this, the whole making this decision without having the knowledge of the impact that it would have on the entity that it's funding is the most problematic thing. And maybe this harkens back to the things that Bud Kennedy said when he came on the show talking about the county and how it's run. And he basically said county government is set up to be the most inefficient way of doing things.
Yeah.
And we keep seeing examples of this.
Yeah.
But I don't think it has to be that way. I mean, I watch the legislature every 2 years file 5, 6, 7,000 bills, and some of them are utter nonsense. And they clog up the timeline of when the committees have to review them, and so things that are really important sometimes don't even get through the process. And so I don't know what the answer is, but it just seems like there could be a simpler answer, and that is getting full information about the budget and what people were planning before you cut the tax rate.
But that's
But I think JPS did determine that they were going to go ahead with the budget that they originally had, because if they tried to cut it back now,
yep.
it would negatively impact services that they were preparing to provide, and that would have a negative impact on their patients. So I think the final outcome is that they were moving ahead with the budget that they had put in place, expecting the higher tax rate.
Yeah.
So I guess this will catch up to them next go round.
Yeah.
Because maybe there's revenues that allow them to do that this year, but will that be the case next year if they don't collect that additional tax?
Yep. This is just showing how behaviors and ideas of a county or a society can then trickle into actual activities and consequences. And this is why voting matters. This is why leadership, vision, conversations you have with people. It's just disappointing because it's these red counties that rely the most on government. And Fort Worth is one of those counties that do need a lot of government support. And, same with the Panther Island. That bad boy doesn't get built without government aid. So it's just this negativity around government and not paying taxes is just so much of who we are is based off the safety nets we provide. And that even includes jobs and just an economy. So let's go ahead and move into wins and losses. My loss is, speaking of the county, Tarrant County offers $750,000 payout for death of prisoner with mental illness. A woman who died of suspected dehydration in county jail in 2021, Georgia K. Baldwin, her family is now being awarded, quote unquote, or giving some type of aid for what happened to their family member. The $750 payment is not admission of liability or admission that the Baldwin son's complaint is true, according to court documents, but it does allow for some type of closure. Ultimately, if you look at the Tarrant County Jail's costs, the county has spent millions of dollars on lawsuit settlements since 2022. A lawsuit over the suicide of Dean Stewart settled at $400,000. A lawsuit over the death of Javante Myers was settled at $1 million. A lawsuit over the beating of Corey Rodriguez at $200,000. A lawsuit over the unattended birth of a baby in a jail cell was settled for $1.2 million. We haven't even got to whatever's going to happen with Anthony Johnson. So it's fascinating how we will spend money on not actually taking care of people because we make mistakes. But when we have things in place like JPS who are trying to be proactive to these needs, we say that's a waste of money. So a big loss is we're wasting money in the wrong ways and not keeping people safe.
So my loss is a little less serious.
I feel like your losses are usually less serious.
I know.
Which is why I'm glad I go first.
So this week is a challenge that has been put out by some organizations to have a week without driving. And this is also an opportunity to highlight public transportation and other ways of getting around. And so we shared this on our social media and encouraged other people to do it. And my goal was to do this to the best of my ability. And I will say I've been struggling a little bit. So my loss is that I've been struggling a little bit in my ability to get around to all the myriad of things that I am committed to attending and going to and participating in, using just public transportation and rides with other people so that I'm not riding alone in a single occupancy vehicle. So yesterday was the first day of this, and I very successfully used Trinity Metro public transportation to get to my morning meeting down on West 7th. The bus picked up Bluebonnet Circle right near my house and delivered me down to West 7th probably as fast as I could have driven it myself without having to do the driving. And that was great. Then I made it to another meeting over in the north side. I could have taken public transit to that. I mapped it out. I had time to do it after my first appointment, but I was there with another person who was driving, so we went together to our second appointment. My third leg of the trip yesterday, I used the Orange Line, the brand new fancy Orange Line bus from right out in front of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce on North Main into downtown, and then walked over to New City Hall, which is not the most walkable location, I will share. I ran into a curb cut that did not exist where a crosswalk is, and it is not the most walkable, friendly environment to walk up to New City Hall. After leaving New City Hall, I was attempting to go home, and what I should have done is taken the Orange Line back down to West 7th and taken the 53 back to my house. But I decided to try to use the on-demand services, and there was a little bit of glitch there, and I am not sure exactly what caused that. There could have been some user error involved in it. I already have somebody who's connected me to folks at Trinity Metro to get some of those questions answered. These are all services that Trinity Metro is working really hard to provide, and so I'm not here to disparage or complain about that. I'm just here to report that I've been struggling a little bit. And today I had a schedule that was so tight that I've basically had to drive to my appointments today. But I will continue this week to utilize public transportation when I can. I'm getting a lot of steps in. And I did that in Sacramento too. We were walking everywhere. I walked 4 miles in the morning all around Midtown before we even started looking around at other things, just on my own. I was getting 11,000 plus steps in Sacramento. And then
we were doing a lot
here
too.
I did a lot of walking yesterday.
Well, I'm glad your commitment to the cause. Your commitment is admirable.
Yeah, there's some great folks over in Dallas that are doing DART and very successfully. I mean, one of the guys over there, he rides DART all the time, so it's not like he is having to go to some extra effort for this week of trying to not drive, because he literally lives car-free as it is. So there's a Instagram account called Data, Riding with Data, and they are big supporters of DART and public transportation as a whole, and some of their stories this week are really encouraging. But you'll have to go back and look at them after the fact, since we're dropping this on Monday.
Yeah. Well, I know you got some serious good wins because they're events that everyone needs to be aware of. I'm going to keep my win very basic. We're doing our pod today on Tuesday because I get the privilege to go to Big Ben on tomorrow, and I'm going from Wednesday to Sunday with a friend, and we're able to go to the least visited national park in the country, and it's right here in Texas. That's Big Bend. If you guys never been, I highly recommend taking family and doing so. It's an awesome experience. You wouldn't believe that it's a part of Texas. It's hard to get to, but Terlingua, the city's great. Getting out to the Chisos Basin, making that happen. It's one of the things I really enjoy when I get to do Texas stuff. So I'm going to be out there camping.
Flying?
No, we're driving 8 hours.
Okay, so we were supposed to go to Marfa for a friend's art exhibit in a couple weeks, and we saw that big long drive, and we were very daunted by that. And then I had a family conflict come up, and I'm going to San Diego instead, but I'm going to have to figure out, because I would love to get out to that part of the country at some point, but that drive.
Yeah, it's basically what we've been able to, is if you can do like a halfway point, which it's maybe a little 3/4, but getting to like, I think it's Alpine or I guess that's close to Marfa already. You could stop in Odessa or Midland, but yeah, right. But sometimes we like to do like a halfway spot and then like just rest and do it in 2 parts.
Yeah, I think ours was that the time that we were going to spend was so short that it was like
Yeah.
14 hours of driving.
Yeah, you don't want to
for
do that.
2 days, and we just that was going to be. Really
And Alpine's also a cool little town. Terlingua, Alpine. There's all. It's like Big Bend is gorgeous though.
I actually
I've
have
been,
a high school friend that lives out there, and she's from California too.
See,
And we're both here in Texas
yeah,
now.
I've been to Glacier National Park. I've been all over Montana, Colorado. I've been to Oregon, Seattle. Big Bend still holds its weight. It holds its weight, so it's definitely worth it.
My kids have been. My mother's been. I have not been.
Yeah. Well, that was my win. What about yours?
So my win is basically a list of things that you have the opportunity to participate in. Speaking of civic engagement, which we spoke about earlier, Reimagine Fort Worth, which is the 2050 comprehensive plan, has some community choice summits coming up in October. The first one is October 7th, which is today, that this podcast drops. And they're having them in the East Fort Worth, West Fort Worth, North Fort Worth, and South Fort Worth. And we will share the link that gives you all of the details as to where these are happening. But this is basically your opportunity to help plan Fort Worth. These open houses will provide you the ability to input on a variety of planning efforts, including a transportation and parks master plan, a Move a Million plan, and the Play Big, which is the parks plan. So this is a lot of engagement happening all at once, and I'm really glad to see the city combining these efforts so that you're not having multiple meetings over multiple days and getting less engagement, but kind of putting it all together to allow people to give that input all at once.
And before you go to the next one, this is the thing we talked about. We made it the big story maybe like 6 months ago. I don't know when you and I talked about this whole comprehensive plan and who was commenting, and we were looking at the comments. We went to that
summit and we looked at the comments,
the Vision
that
Summit.
were coming in. Yep.
People, I'm telling you, it is the older class that shows up to this, and some of those people have some of the craziest ideas and feedback they want to share with people. And so I beg you to take this seriously and show up to one of these events. If you have kids, if you're young, understand the 50-year plan, you're going to be in your 50s, 60s, 70s. Like, this is your Fort Worth they're asking feedback on, and you just got to get involved. Besides getting civically involved voting, these community choice summits. But I can't guarantee you will find a date at this thing. I can't guarantee that. that won't happen at this. But
maybe. There's a lot of younger people working for the city of Fort Worth now. I've noticed a new generation of folks working in various departments over there. So maybe you will find love.
Yeah.
Yes, please do participate. I serve on the technical committee for this effort, and we pointed out that we thought that they weren't reaching as many people as they should, and asked that they please do another round of engagement. And I think this is part of that. And we also asked them to try to combine these efforts so that we weren't exhausting our communities with multiple efforts, disconnected and disjointed from each other. So, and on the city's website, there's information both in English and in Spanish. So hopefully there's not that language barrier causing folks to not be able to find out the information that they need to get to participate. But I also wanted to mention another event coming up, which is Arts Goggle on October 19th. I know that Near Southside Inc. is still looking for volunteers to help with that. I have volunteered with both set up and breakdown. You can block captain for the middle of the day. There's lots of opportunities. There's even some opportunities this go around for next day helping out and pre-event setup type of efforts. So if there's still if you go to the Near Southside Inc.'s website, they've got links to those volunteer opportunities, and you can go as a participant. You can go participate and volunteer. There's just a whole myriad of options. But Arts Goggle is an amazing event that Near Southside Inc.'s amazing team puts a lot of effort and energy into delivering, and I encourage you all to check it out.
Well, there you go. We have done another episode together, diving into the different crannies of the city and what's going good and what's going bad and what we need to improve. And thank you, all of you listeners, for listening in and being a part of this conversation.
You know what we didn't mention?
We did not mention. We should have mentioned that at the top of the hour.
Yeah, I guess maybe we're
We're
not over here trying to be podcasters, right, EJ?
Yeah, and we're humble too, right? That's what it is.
We are very, very humble. Although we're not going to let it.
I don't think anybody would say that about me, but that's fine.
So we are grateful.
Yes.
That we were recognized by Fort Worth Weekly as the Critics' Choice for podcast
of the year. Boom shakalaka. I'm going to make a horn enter. Brr, 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 brr. Yes, we are. Thank you, Fort Worth Weekly. I think that's really cool. Critics' Choice. I mean, I think that's cool because it's people who have nuance of the city and their intellect, and that's the people who it's like the Rotten Tomatoes, the Critics' Choice. They're tough. And so I think the fact that
it's not just a popularity contest.
It's not a popularity contest. It's about quality.
Not dissing the people who won the popular
choice.
Yeah. That's good too.
Yes.
That's good too.
I didn't even know this stuff was going on. I thought, I didn't know that this happened at all until like a couple hours ago. Days ago. But not on the day.
Because as the council member, I was often the popular choice and the Critics' Choice for Council Member of the Year. And that was always very flattering, and I appreciated it very much.
Yeah, Fort Worth Weekly really loves Ann Zeta, which I appreciate.
Partially it was because I responded to all of their outreach. There weren't a lot of council members that did that.
Who took their
calls.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Fort Worth Weekly. And I think we need to pick up some type of plaque or something from what I saw in the email. They sent me an email about it, so we need to pick up some type of plaque. But yeah, thank you.
Control your life, control your life. Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Follow us like double tap. Now they control your life, control your life.